Hey there guys, I am doing something a little bit different today. I thought it would probably be easier to make this into a video because to type it all out, one, takes time, and two, a lot of energy. So I thought, why not just hit the record button and show you the 8 books that I actually didn't review on my blog this year. I wanted to, I love them, I just didn't get around to reviewing them. So that's what you're going to see in this video. Little snippets of the 8 books that I loved, wanted to review, didn't review, and I'm now going to put them in this clever little video on YouTube. Here we go. First up, we have The One and Only by Emily Giffin. Emily Giffin obviously has written Something Borrowed, Something Blue, those kind of books. Very chick lit, and that's kind of the same thing you're going to get with this. I kind of call it like popcorn reads because when you turn like one page, you just can't stop. Like you're just like so invested in this read, and that's exactly what happened with this book. It's a story of a woman named Shay. She's 33 years old. The premise is kind of Texas football, which I'm not from America, but I have a very vague understanding that the Super Bowl and football is a really big deal, obviously, as is hockey here in Canada. So football is a big deal, and that's the premise of this book. Shay is like a kind of an assistant coach. The coach is her best friend's dad, and so this tragedy happens, and she's forced to kind of make a decision to stay in the small town or to take this big city job, all the while she's like confiding in her best friend and kind of secretly falling for Coach slash her best friend's father. So as I'm sure you can imagine, drama ensues. That's exactly what happens. And then the interesting part was like the end was so different than what I thought it was going to be. So it's definitely worth checking out. And it's definitely worth like either like getting it out from the library or buying it or picking it up for your mom, sister, best friend, whatever, because it's a really, really great read. And honestly, you will fly through. It's kind of like a thick book, but I don't even remember it being a thick book. Like I just flew through it. So I think you will too if you pick this one up. Loved it. The next one is something a little bit different, for me anyway. Seconds by Brian Lee O'Malley. So Seconds is a graphic novel, and I don't actually read a lot of graphic novels, obviously, as I'm sure you know if you follow the blog. And I guess the reason being is that I haven't really been recommended one before. I haven't been said, like, this is the graphic novel that you need to read. I've heard of Scott Pilgrim, obviously. In Toronto, Scott Pilgrim's huge, and so is Brian Lee O'Malley. But this book came out, and it was like one of those books that everybody was talking about. So I was like, what the heck, I'll read it. And I read it and I absolutely loved it. It's the story of a young woman named Katie, and Katie is a restaurant owner, and everything's kind of going well for her, but then things turn really sour really quickly. You know, her and her boyfriend break up, the restaurant's not doing too well, there's drama with like her colleagues, like the people that she employs, and then she gets home one night and she bumps in. This woman is in her home, and she's like this mysterious figure, and she's like, take this mushroom and you can redo everything over again. So that's exactly what she does. I was surprised she did it too, but she does. And of course she like fixes everything, but sometimes like too much of a good thing can turn really bad because she starts misusing like the use of these mushrooms, and they just keep dwindling down, and she keeps making mistakes, but don't worry, keeps fixing them. So obviously this whole thing builds up a little bit, and it's so good, and there's such a good lesson in it, and the interior of it is just so beautiful. Like it's just gorgeous. I can't even tell you how like much I loved it, and it was so, I read it in one sitting. I thought it was really brilliantly done. I think anybody would enjoy this book, and I highly recommend it. It's like honestly a collector's edition in my opinion, because it's just so gorgeous, and like even the end papers, well not the end papers, but the hardcover with the flap off is just like, I mean, I actually even saw somebody like got a tattoo of this tree. So really, really gorgeous book. I loved it. Now I've got the flap off and this, and I don't want to bend it. So I'm going to put that there and that there and go on to my next book, which is, no surprise, weirdly, don't know how I didn't review this on my book or my blog, but Not That Kind of Girl by, should move my hand, no surprise, Lena Dunham. Lena Dunham obviously to me is like the mecca of like awesome people. I don't know why I love her so much. I just think she's so talented and she's so young and she's so brilliant. Like, to me, she's like a very young Nora Ephron. Like, she really just, she's intuitive to what people want and need, and I think she speaks to women in a way that's really like real and honest. And so she, in this memoir, tells you what she's learned. I can't believe she put herself so out there. She talks about losing her virginity. She talks about going to camp. She talks about who you should share a bed with, and a whole bunch of like short little essays that are so brilliant, so personal to her. But there's so many lessons in each one that you can take from them, and I know I took tons of them. She came here twice in Toronto, and both times I got to see her. She did the comedy festival, the Just for Laughs comedy festival, which was really good, and that was the first time she had read from the memoir, so she, I think, was a little bit nervous, but it didn't even matter because I was like, oh my god, that's Lena Dunham. And then she came for the TPL, the Toronto Public Library event, which was chaos and amazing, and I had like second row seats, and I was there at 4:30 for a 7 o'clock show. Totally worth it. And I got my book signed, and it was awesome. And yeah, anyway, it was just like really cool. And speaking of end papers, here's another one. I actually follow her friend Joanne, who made these end papers on Instagram. She's just really talented. And she drew all these like little images throughout. It's just so beautiful. And I think one of my favorite parts of the book it says, is a dedication, sorry, and it says, for my family, of course, for Nora, who I assume is Ephron, and for Jack, who is just as she said he would be. Like, isn't that beautiful? And speaking of like really cute details, like look at the little, whoa, over here, the little gold shoes with her initials. I just think it's a brilliant package. It's one of those books like I will continuously read throughout the years because it just has so many like lessons. Honestly, I loved it. It's brilliant. The next book I chose actively not to review on my blog, mostly because I kind of think that everyone and anyone has read this book, but I hadn't until this year in the summer. And of course, I'm speaking about Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn. As you can see, I loved it. I thought it was obviously brilliant. I'm sure all of you did too. If you haven't read this book, like myself, I don't even know how I let it slip, but I did. I guess I know why I chose not to read it originally. Originally, I thought it was really scary, and I don't do scary books. And then somebody finally convinced me that it's not scary. It's more like a thriller, but not in a like gory murder kind of like way. It's just really like on the edge of your seat, need to know what happens kind of book. And there's a part in it, and if you've read it, you're knowing what I'm talking about, but like you turn the page and you're like, what? I have never read a book like this before in my life that absolutely like just threw me on the floor, like with like holy shit kind of moment. Like I was shocked, and like I went and saw the movie. I thought it was a wonderful rendition of the book. I thought they really captured it. I highly recommend it. Ben Affleck plays an amazing Nick. The girl that plays Amy is really, really talented as well. I forget her name. I'm really sorry. But it was just really well done. And I think that the book is one of those books that just leaves you with your mouth hanging open, and I have not read something like this before, and now I'm trying to like find the same kind of feeling from another book, and it's yet to happen. So that is that book. It's kind of like a marriage and a really like fine-tooth, like microscopic look at marriage, and I don't want to give too much away because it's one of those things like that if you do, you kind of give away the whole plot. So just take my word on it. If you haven't read it, honestly, don't be scared. It's just really, really like thrillerish and so good. Next up, I have something a little bit different. I read Neil Patrick Harris's Choose Your Own autobiography. Isn't he like the cutest guy ever? So when I picked up this book, I honestly kind of thought like, oh, okay, he's going to talk about Doogie Howser and How I Met Your Mother and that kind of stuff. But he really like peeled away layers that I didn't think he was going to do. He talked about coming out. He talked about his husband. He talked about his family and what they mean to him. He talked about Anne Heche and how much he really doesn't like her, and Dustin Diamond, and how much he really doesn't like him either. Like he really, really, really exposed way more than I thought he would, which I really liked. If you like celebrity bios, this is really good. Obviously, like the choose your own biography or autobiography, I guess I should say, part of it was like fun, but for me, I could have just stripped all that away and just got the autobiography itself, because he's like, if you want to hear from Barney Stinson now, go to this page. If you want to hear from Doogie Howser, go to this page. So you're kind of flopping all over the place. I just read it through in one full sitting, and for me, that's exactly what I wanted. And I really thought he really just took it the extra mile, and I thought he did a really good job on it. So really, really good. I think anyone and everyone will like this. And if you're a fan of How I Met Your Mother, Broadway, anything like that, it is all in this book, and it's really, really well done. Next up, I have another biography. I'm just all about the biographies, I guess. I just didn't review them. But this was one, like when I was saying, like I read a lot of books, obviously. And this was one of those books that I read. I got a really early manuscript last year in 2013. I had to think about it. And it was my Christmas holiday, and I read it, and I meant to review it because it came out in October of this year, and I just never did. And the book I'm talking about is Where I Belong by Alan Doyle. Obviously, if you're in Canada, you should know this face. He is the lead singer of Great Big Sea, and I'm from the east coast of Canada, and Great Big Sea is like a way of life down there. Like, you know, all their songs, they're a big deal, and I could not wait to read this memoir. It's a story of, not the story, the life telling, if you will, of Alan Doyle living in Petty Harbour, which is a small little town in Newfoundland. And I was kind of expecting when I opened the book to get like a recount of like what it was like to grow up in the music business and stuff like that, like the really like Great Big Sea kind of stuff. But it wasn't about that at all. It was like the fun stories that take place in Alan Doyle's like childhood and like growing up with brothers and sisters and having to share one bathroom and his mother's like homemade bread and all the characters that live in Petty Harbour. And it's just such a good read, and it's like you don't even need to know who Great Big Sea is to like read this book and enjoy it. It really is just small town exposed, and I loved it. I thought it was really smart, and he's just such a character. And if you have a chance, just YouTube him because he's honestly so funny. And he like in all the interviews and stuff like that, he's just like, I don't know, guess people wanted to really hear about my life, and it was just like the way of life down there in Petty Harbour. And so it's just a really great book. I highly recommend it to everyone, and it's one of those reads that I think anyone, Canada, US, should be reading this book. It's really good. It's available in both countries, so pick it up. Okay, this one's a little bit different for me, but I loved it, and it is called, I have an advanced reading copy, but it's called Who by Fire by Fred Stenson. It came out this fall. It is the story of a family who, well, first let me say, I kind of I would compare it to like Erin Brockovich happening in Alberta. Like that's exactly what it's like. Like this town, this big oil company comes into town, a gas company, and they take over, and they like, you know, towns are affected, like families are affected, and all this like sour gas coming into their houses is causing people to be really sick, and they don't know why. And of course, then they start to relate it to this big like oil company that's coming to town. So it's one family's exposed reach of this, and there's a young boy named Billy, and it's in the 1960s, and he's a child, and he's like, you know, watching his parents argue about it and fall apart because of it, because his father just won't give up fighting this big corporation. And then it flips to like the here and now, where Billy, now Bill, is an adult, and he's kind of trying, he's still living this life and what is happening. It's a really, really interesting read. It's a fictional novel, but it has a lot of like reality to it, because these things happen, and it's really like about the environment, but done in such a fictional, gripping way that you have to like know what happens. I think Fred Stenson did a really good job, and I think I really, really loved it, and it's, I think, going to be a huge book and a book about progress, so highly recommended. And the last book is another memoir. Love my memoirs, didn't review them, and this one was a lot of fun. Oh, it's so heavy. Yes, Please by Amy Poehler. So obviously Amy Poehler, like, I mean, really, this is amazing. Amy Poehler is like from the SNL family and the alumni, and she is fantastic, and she's funny, and she really looks at like growing up, getting her start in SNL, and like, well, not just SNL, but like all comedy and comedy clubs and stuff like that, meeting Tina Fey, getting married, getting divorced, her children. She really just puts it all out there. She talks a lot about how writing a book is really hard. She even takes a break in the middle of it and like hands her typewriter, or not typewriter, obviously her computer, over to Seth Meyers and he writes a chapter of it because she needs a break. Because you got to think about it, like she only writes these like small little skits most times, and I'm sure she writes movies and stuff like that, but she's never sat down to write a whole book. And so she goes on continuously about how hard it is to write one. And I saw her in person at Indigo here in Toronto, and she was really smart and funny and very, very polite. The book is gorgeous. The pages are so, like, it's so beautiful. Like, I can't even, and like, it says symmetry. Oh, you probably can read it that way. Symmetry is pleasing, but not as sexy. Einstein is cool, but Picasso knows what I'm talking about. Like, she's just so brilliant, and she's so, like, funny and smart, and I just love women that are, like, putting themselves out there, and she has this whole YouTube channel, like, about smart girls. I think the message she puts out there is really positive, and I can appreciate that, and so I think this book is obviously one everybody should be picking up. It's brilliant, and, yeah. So those were my 8 books. It took 16 minutes for me to tell you about all of them. But, you know, I owed you like 8 books that I didn't review. I'm going to get better. I promise. I'm trying to read things now and review them as soon as I read them. And yeah, review them as soon as I read them and schedule them so that they come out around the on sale dates rather than having to make a video for about 20 minutes to tell you about each of them. I'm sure you can forgive me, but if you have any questions about the books I just mentioned, please leave a comment. I'd love to answer them. I love them all, and I think you will too. So thanks for always stopping by. I really appreciate it. I love the comments and everything. I love your tweets. It's awesome. I love chatting about books. So please, please, please leave messages and say hello. And if I don't see you on the internet, let me say have a wonderful and happy holiday with your family and friends. Okay, bye.